So what we're going to do this evening is we're carrying on a series that we started 2 weeks ago. We started 2 weeks ago on a short series of lectures that our founder Sangharakshita gave in, I think it was the late 60s or early 70s, called The Essence of Zen. And we're not a Zen tradition, but what Bhante Sangharakshita tried to do in this series is kind of distill the essence of Zen and draw out themes from Zen that would be applicable to anybody that's trying to practice Buddhism. And that's what we've been doing in looking at his lectures the last couple of weeks. And the lectures center around these 4 lines, which I'll read out. So these 4 lines: a special transmission outside the scriptures, no dependence on words and letters, direct pointing to the mind, seeing into one's own nature and realizing Buddhahood. I'll read that again. A special transmission outside the scriptures, no dependence on words and letters, direct pointing to the mind, seeing into one's own nature and realizing Buddhahood. So we've been looking at those lines over the last few weeks. And this evening, I'm going to be looking at these lines, seeing into one's own nature and realizing Buddhahood. So that's quite exciting, isn't it? That's what we're doing this evening. So I'll be unpacking those lines over the course of this evening. What do we mean, seeing into one's own nature and realizing Buddhahood? What I'm going to do is tell you a story. So in the final part of the lecture, Bhante uses a Buddhist teaching called the Sarangama Sutta, and it's a story about the Buddha's attendant, Ananda, who's his sort of faithful companion throughout his life. It's not a true story, it's kind of a myth. So it's a myth that's designed to point something out about us and our nature and our minds. So I'll just read this to you. It's a few minutes long. You can close your eyes if you want to, or you can just listen. So this is set in Shravasti, northern India, and the Buddha and all of his followers are invited by the king to a great feast. And at the appropriate time, all of them leave to make their way to the king's palace. So they all leave the monastery. And everyone leaves and they're on their way, apart from Ananda, who's the Buddha's attendant and the Buddha's cousin, because he's out on an errand. So when he comes back, he finds that everybody's gone. There's nobody there, basically. And it's getting towards lunchtime, and there's nothing to eat in the palace. And Ananda starts getting hungry. So he decides that he's going to go out with his begging bowl. So he goes out with his begging bowl on his arms round, which is what the monks used to do. You know, they would go out with a bowl and they would beg their food. And like a very good monk, he's determined to go to any house. He doesn't make a distinction. He doesn't go to the rich-looking houses trying to get nice food or avoid the houses of poor people. He just goes to every house and he's determined to eat whatever's put in his bowl. And he comes to the house of a woman called Matungi. And Matungi has a beautiful daughter called Prakriti. And Ananda is a very handsome young monk. I hadn't told you that bit so far. He's a very handsome young monk. Sometimes people get more handsome when they do lots of meditation, don't they? Or they go on retreat. I don't know if you've ever seen that. People come back from retreat, they've got a certain kind of radiance about them, haven't they? Well, Ananda was spending a lot of time with the Buddha and a lot of time on retreat. So apparently he's a very handsome young monk. So when Prakriti sees him, she falls in love. And she doesn't just fall in love, she falls violently in love. So she's absolutely besotted with Ananda, and she's so in love that she asks her mother to cast a love spell on Ananda. Now, Ananda is a conscientious and devout monk, but he's absolutely defenseless against this spell, and he falls hopelessly in love with Prakriti. Meanwhile, the Buddha's returned with all his followers, And the Buddha has these special powers of the mind, so he knows exactly what's going on, basically. He understands what's been happening between Ananda and Prakriti. And he summons up the Bodhisattva of wisdom, Manjushri. So there's a mythic Bodhisattva figure, very, very advanced spiritual being called Manjushri, and he chants a mantra which breaks the spell. And that's the only thing that could break the spell. They're so in love, the two of them, that it's only Manjushri that could break the spell. And Manjushri has this sword. He's got like a flaming sword, which represents his wisdom. And he comes along with his flaming sword, and he chants his mantra, and that breaks the spell. And Prakriti and Ananda are completely crestfallen, and they make their way back to the Buddha, to the feet of the Buddha. So maybe you know what that's like, at the end of a love affair, maybe not falling at the feet of the Buddha, maybe you did, I don't know. But anyway, they come back to the Buddha, and the story doesn't end there. So the Buddha's he's not annoyed with Ananda, he's not upset with him, but he uses this as an opportunity, basically. He sees what's happening with Ananda, and he asks him some questions. And he says, I'm going to ask you some questions, but I want you to answer spontaneously. So I don't want you to go through the motions, I don't want you to give me any platitudes, I don't want you to give me any of this like spiritual speak. I want you to answer me spontaneously and completely authentically. That's what he's asking for from Ananda. And the first question he asks him is, Ananda, why did you start following me? And Ananda says, well, I started following you because I was so enamored with the look of you. You just looked so beautiful, you looked so radiant, you looked so wise, and I thought, I've got to follow this man. So he was impressed with the sight of the Buddha. So then the Buddha starts asking him questions, and he says, well, how did you perceive me? You say that you were impressed with the sight of me. How did you perceive me? And Ananda says that he perceived him with his eyes and with his mind. And the Buddha's not satisfied with that. He asks him more questions, and he says, well, where are these located? Where is your mind located? Where are your eyes located? And Ananda answers him, and he says, well, the mind is here, the eyes are located in the head, and so on. And the Buddha's not satisfied with that, and he sort of takes Ananda down and says, look, you're not really answering me. And then Ananda says, well, maybe the mind is located outside of the body. Maybe it's like a lamp that illuminates the inside of the body, but it's actually outside of the body. And the Buddha sort of says, no. And again, he's not having it. And basically, they have this whole dialogue, which goes on for a very long time, about the nature of the mind and the nature of perception. And it's like the Buddha's kind of putting pressure on Ananda to really, really look at his experience. Like, what is it that's actually really going on? Ananda, having recently come out of this very, very, intense feelings towards Prakriti, and then he's come at the feet of the Buddha, and the Buddha asks him all of this, basically, and sort of leads him through this kind of, this dialogue, basically, to try and understand what's really going on. So what the Buddha's doing is he is trying to show Ananda the nature of his mind. So he's trying to show him the nature of his mind, both in terms of his ordinary experience, and then he's trying to get him to a sort of a higher experience, basically. Ananda's had this experience, and then he comes to the Buddha, and the Buddha's trying to get him to see what is actually going on with his mind. He's sort of trying to do that because he's trying to show him what the characteristics of his mind are. So that his mind is characterized by grasping and aversion, and it's fueled by a misapprehension about the nature of reality, basically. So it's like there's this ordinary mind and this higher mind, and the Buddha's trying to point out to Ananda what is actually really going on. And this is referring to a Buddhist teaching called the Kleshas. So this teaching of the Kleshas tells us that in our ordinary experience, in our ordinary day-to-day mind, our experience is always characterized to some degree by craving and aversion, so a kind of push-pull experience. So there's always something that we either want or we don't want. We're either grasping after something, or we're trying to push something away. So we're grasping after something if it's pleasant, or if it's unpleasant, or we perceive it to be unpleasant, we're trying to push it away. And all of that is fueled by a misapprehension about the nature of reality, basically. So we think that if we do that, then if we get enough of what is pleasant, and if we can push away what is unpleasant, then that will lead to lasting happiness and fulfillment, basically. And all of that is our kind of deluded nature, basically. And that's what's meant by this teaching of the Kleshas. So what I'd like you to do is, I'd like you to get into pairs, and I'd like you to have a think about why is this example of Ananda falling in love, why is that a helpful kind of starting point for this exploration? If it is indeed a helpful starting point for the exploration. So Ananda's come to the Buddha having fallen in love and fallen out of love. And then the Buddha kind of takes it on from there, basically, and leads him through this dialogue. Now, why would falling in love be a kind of starting point? So think about your own experience, whether you've had this kind of experience, what that was like, and why is that a good starting point for looking at how the mind works, particularly in relationship to this teaching of the Kleshas. So let's get into pairs, and you can spend a few minutes looking at that. Okay, so does anybody want to say what you shared or what you think? Anybody care to volunteer?
I think we got to quite an interesting conclusion.
Yeah.
In terms of what do they want, what do they not want. So we were discussing that they want to be in love, right? They want to be under a spell.
Under a spell, okay, yeah.
And even though it's all based on them being beautiful, there's no substance in really their relationship. From what you told me, maybe there was, I don't know. But what they don't want is to see reality as it is.
Very good. So for the people online, the short summary there was they don't want to see reality as it is. They want to be in love and something about them being very beautiful. There was no substance to the relationship. I don't know Ananda and Prakriti, so I don't want to criticize them too much and start. But it's quite clear that Ananda is saying he's a disciple of the Buddha. I mean, you've got to feel sorry for Ananda a little bit, really, haven't you? He's saying he's a disciple of the Buddha, but actually, he seems what he's done is he's very easily distracted and he's very easily blown off course. But that's because he's been put under this spell, hasn't he? But as you said, he doesn't want to see reality. Yeah. Would anybody else want to add anything to that or say anything?
I think I've got good grades this time.
Let's hear. Say again.
I think I've got good grades.
Good grades. Yes. Top to mark. A+. Yeah. I'll give you a chocolate after class. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? What about this thing about craving and the Kleshas? Anyone? Yeah. Go on. You're gonna.
Oh, yeah. We talked about craving and desire.
Yeah.
Just to challenge what he said, we spoke about it's a common trope within a lot of spiritual traditions of almost demonizing romantic love.
Yeah.
But then there is also this but why is that seen as non-reality? Because some spiritual practitioners teach that it exposes the true nature of the divine, which is like an all-loving state.
Yeah.
So, we were talking about that contradiction.
Yeah. Well, let's just stay for now with the thing about you were saying you were talking about craving. So I think there is something in that, and there's an energy there, isn't there? And I think so. For the benefit of the people at home, you're saying in some spiritual traditions, falling in love gets criticized, and in some spiritual traditions, it's seen as the nature of the divine and so on. But I think the thing to point out there is that it's the sort of the most extreme example of craving that most of us can think of, isn't it? I mean, I don't think they had I don't know, maybe they had crack and heroin and that sort of thing in the Buddha's day, but Ananda clearly wouldn't have gone near that stuff. So, the closest thing we're going to get is falling in love, which is a very, very, very intense form of craving, isn't it? I mean, I might say something about what you were saying later about the energy that's tied up with that. In fact, I will say something about that later, which can get us to something deeper. But for the moment, I'd just like to stay with this thing about it's in terms of this teaching of the kleshas, it's an incredibly strong... there's a lot of craving tied up with that, isn't there? There's a lot of craving tied up with that. And it is like he's under a spell, isn't it? So it's a bit like we fall into this delusion. So we don't actually see the way things are. What we see is everything's sort of projected outwards onto this one person. And it is a little bit like you're under a spell, isn't it? I don't know. I mean, I remember being in love once, and I was young once, I don't mean that, sorry. I remember being in love once, and it was like you just couldn't stop thinking about this woman's face and her voice and that sort of thing. I remember in an old job that I had, sitting across from this woman that I just started working with, and she'd just got engaged and she was about to get married, and I knew when it was him on the phone. This was like the old days before mobile phones, so he would have to phone the office and she would pick it up, and normally she'd pick it up and be discussing community projects and that sort of thing, and I knew instantly when it was him that had called, because she'd just go, "Hi," like that, and it would just be like this kind of, she'd just instantly melt, And we used to have this thing where he would phone up, she would sort of melt, and then when she put the phone down, I would start singing la 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 la, la 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 la, which is a song by Minnie Riperton called "Loving You." Anyway, so when we're in love, it's like this it's like this big sort of projection, isn't it? Basically, we think it's about the other person. Just to say, I'm not knocking this. I'm in a romantic relationship. It's not. What I'm trying to do is point out something of the nature of this and what that can tell us about our mind, basically. So we think it's about the other person, but especially in the early stages, if you stay in if you are to stay in a relationship, that early stage needs to change, doesn't it? It needs to get more real. You can't stay like that it'd be really unpleasant, wouldn't it? Can you imagine being in love for like that for 20 years or something? I don't know. It would just be walking around kind of not able to do the shopping and stuff like that, Anyway, but to begin with, it's you think it's about the other person, but actually it's mostly about you. It's something in you that gets projected onto the other person. And the reason why I was saying that thing of it's not reality is because mostly what it consists of is your ideas about what's going to happen. And I think the stronger those feelings are, often then the more there is a projection, so you're projecting about how this person is going to really understand you, how they're going to get you the way nobody else ever has. They're going to be the perfect person. You're going to have this life together. Da 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 da. And the more of a projection that is, basically, the more then is at stake. And the more you pile that on, the more painful it is if it all comes crashing down, basically. And that only ever existed in your head. That only ever existed in your mind. Does that make sense? I don't know if you've had that experience. I have, where it's like you build up this whole kind of fantasy thing in your head, basically, and then if it comes crashing down, nothing actually really changes, other than you realize that what it does is it creates a gap between your fantasy and the reality. And the bigger the gap is, the more pain and suffering there is, basically. And that can be really painful, can't it? Like, I know we're laughing and we're sort of making like this. That can be really, really, really painful. But it's also, and this is why the Buddha was sort of talking to Ananda in this way, it's also an opportunity. So it's also an opportunity to wake up and to see things actually as they are. And I think this is an interesting example because you could say that about a lot of what we do with our minds a lot of the time. This is a really extreme example, but actually we're doing that all the time in our minds. We just don't realize it. We're projecting into the future. We're fantasizing, we're planning, we're scheming, and the further that is from how things actually are, which is that things are impermanent and that sometimes in life you'll be disappointed and that you are not the center of the universe, the more of a gap there is between that and what it is that you've got planned or lined up, then the more capacity there is for difficulty, basically. And at the same time, if we can really see that and really start to actually to see that with a different lens, that's a real opportunity. And I'll say more about that after the tea break. Okay, so before the break we were talking about the story of Ananda and him falling in love and why that might be a helpful kind of starting off point or jumping off point for realizing the Buddha's teaching more deeply. And in the story you've actually got the Buddha saying to Ananda, look more deeply, see how your mind actually is, notice reality. So it's almost like come out of your projection and come into reality. And from the Buddha's point of view, the more we do that, well, it's not just from the Buddha's point of view, it's actually the more we do that, the more we actually step away from causing our own suffering and our own difficulty. So I think it's interesting, the story, because it's, as we said, or I may have said, I can't remember, before the tea break, it's often, there's an opportunity there, basically, and it's often when we face a difficulty or when we face a sort of painful episode like that, it's like there needs to be a certain amount of gravity in our experience. There needs to be an event that has enough weight that it can actually sort of crush through our projections. Most of the time we go through life ignoring how things actually are and sort of convincing ourselves that if we just get our own way enough of the time and we engineer things to be set up the way that we want, that our lives will be happy enough. And most of the time that's, maybe that's true. There's some underlying level of dissatisfaction, but sometimes it's quite subtle, and also we don't want to look at it. We'd rather not look at it. But occasionally something happens and there'll be some sort of realization, if we're lucky. And sometimes that can be, it can be like a sort of a gentle realization where you wake up to the truth of things and you sort of say, actually, I realized it was like this, or it was like this. And sometimes it can be absolutely devastating. Like, this is what Manjushri's sword represents. The image that I was talking about in the first half is sometimes that's absolutely devastating, isn't it? Like something comes crashing in and you just cannot argue with it. I've been coming to the Buddhist Center for a long time, and I've been involved in Buddhism for a long time. And I've seen what often happens is people come along to the center because they've had a major life event like that. When you hear people's story, we do these talks on retreats sometimes, why I'm a Buddhist, and there's usually a point in somebody's life where it's like reality comes crashing in, and sometimes what can happen is there's a kind of an instant sort of waking up, and it's like you see how things actually are. But even if that's not the case, what can happen is it's not necessarily like you see how things are, but you see how things aren't. Like you've convinced yourself that things are a certain way, and then you realize that actually that's not the case. I mean, the image that I was thinking of, it's a little bit like, we've got this map, and we're walking around and we keep going down these blind alleys, or we keep sort of bumping into things, or we keep not being able to find our way. And then one day it's like, we realize, we're actually in the wrong territory or something like that. And it starts to become clearer. And we might not know what we need to know, but at least we might know that we need to do something differently, or that might be a starting point for starting to search for some answers or do something differently. This was my experience. Like when I first came to the Buddhist Center, I got involved with a Buddhist center in this tradition a long time ago in 1997. And I got involved in a kind of a low-key way and was practicing for a while, used to come along to a class, like once a week, that sort of thing. But it didn't really take hold with me. And then at a certain point, I'd kind of drifted away from the Buddhist center, and my life was going absolutely fantastically well. I'd set everything up really well. I was living this fantastic life. I was really enjoying myself. I was, I won't go into all the details, but I was having a great time, basically. And then the pinnacle of that was like I fell in love with this woman who we'd been friends for a long time. She was like sort of like my dream woman, I thought, in some ways. And at the end of this long cycling holiday where I cycled through Vietnam and Cambodia, and then she met me in Cambodia, and we had this week around the Angkor Wat temples, and it was all enchanted and lovely, and we fell in love, and then we got together. Anyway, cut a long story short, she cheated on me and left me. That's not funny. How dare you all laugh at me? Actually, it was... Anyway, I gave a talk about this a while ago, maybe a couple of years ago, a year or two ago, I think, and I said that was the best thing that ever happened to me. And it really was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it was like a shattering experience. And I can't describe exactly what happened, but on the last day that we were together, it was like all bets are off. I'd projected all of my future happiness onto her so much. Like she was an American woman living in Burma. I was going to move to Burma because I work for an NGO, and I was going to move over there and do that kind of work, and it was all going to be great, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And it was like all of that was cancelled. I was so embarrassed and humiliated because I'd said to all my friends this was what was going to happen and all of this, So, and it was like it was like the rug was sort of pulled from under me, basically. And somehow in that experience, something else completely opened up. And the last day that we were together, I had this intensely strong vision experience, basically, where I was like surrounded by Buddha figures. And the overwhelming experience for that was like, this is true. It's true. It's so true. It's like truer than anything I've ever experienced in my life before. And I think that could only happen because everything had been stripped away, basically. There was nothing in my life at that time that, it was like I'd built up this huge, great edifice, and I don't know what you'd call it, and it had all just come crashing down. And in the crashing down, there was like this blank slate where I could actually experience things as they were. But not only that, because I'd been practicing for years and years and years, it was like suddenly I got it. Like I really got it. And I think it was like the next day or a few days later that I came here. So I'm so grateful for that experience. And yeah, it all came out of that very, very sort of, in one way, sort of painful relationship breakup. But I'm so glad it happened. And I've met so many people here that have come along because of, bereavements or breakups or job losses or whatever it is. And you wouldn't wish that experience on somebody, but there's an opportunity there to see deeply into how things are, rather than living this life where we're trying to set things up where we just sort of get what we want. And there's nothing, in a way, there's nothing wrong with that. But if we don't see what it is that we're doing, then we're setting ourselves up for difficulty, basically. And this is what happens in the story, is that, Ananda, the Buddha basically leads Ananda through this kind of dialogue, and he leads him to a breakthrough, basically. So Ananda has this kind of breakthrough where he really sees how things are. And that's what the sword of Manjushri represents. So I'd like to ask all of you, again, let's get into pairs and choose a different person this time. Have you ever had an experience like that? So it might be in relation to a difficult experience. It might have just been when you were on retreat, when you were in particularly conditions where your mind could quieten down and the sort of chatter that is normally there habitually in our mind was quiet enough that you could actually see something. I suppose what I'm getting at here is, what I'm talking about is, it feels like a different order of reality. It's like our ordinary day-to-day consciousness, which is like the me, I want this, I don't want that, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, if I just get this, everything will be great, when I have this, my life will be sorted out, I'll be fulfilled, all of that sort of thing. That's like our day-to-day mundane mind, and sometimes something else opens up, and you can feel that it's different. You can feel that it has a different order about it. Maybe it's an experience of beauty. Maybe it's an experience of feeling that something is clearer or more expansive. Have you had an experience like that? And share that with the other person in your pair. So let's get into pairs and explore that a little bit. Okay. So again, I wonder whether anyone would like to share what you talked about. Anyone want to share any of your experiences? Rowan, yeah.
Yeah. It was an experience I had on my first retreat.
Right.
In
Yeah.
which around that period, I had a sort of difficult relationship with my parents, and we were doing the Metabhavana practice, and it was sort of combined with a visualization of Buddha Shakyamuni, and I don't know, at one point during that, it's like something sort of clicked. It's like the emotional difficulty I felt like I was having sort of disapparated, and I was left with sort of regret for the ways in which I was negatively contributing to the difficulty. And though that hasn't sort of, though that realization hasn't necessarily completely permeated my life, and my relationship with them, it's I don't know, it's had a significant positive impact on that relationship, and it's gone from being sort of difficult and negative to generally quite positive.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I really like the thing you were saying about that something clicked. It's like there's an experience of, I don't know, like an experience of something opening up there, or and then it sounds like that it sounds like that could be a negative experience, but although it actually could be you're talking about something that's quite unpleasant, it sounds overall it sounds very positive. Is that the case? Yeah. Entirely. Yeah. Great. Thank you, Rowan. That's wonderful. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
I might just share this because I feel like it was interesting.
Yeah.
It's a bit vulnerable, but I was just describing how I once went on a meditation retreat. It was a Zen meditation retreat. And on this meditation retreat, you're required to answer a koan.
Okay.
It's like a riddle.
Yeah.
And if you're able to answer it, usually it takes someone on. If you're able to answer it, it kind of opens up a window into the path of enlightenment and literally seeing things as they really are. And my question was, who am I? And I had arrived in quite a stressed state. People usually do. And after about a day doing this, answering this question, who am I? I became utterly convinced that I'd got the answer. And so I went up to the Zen master and I was like, I've got the answer. And he kind of questioned me, and I was like, it's really that I'm no one. I'm not special. And that's what that was the kind of the real what I was trying to describe. I was like, it's just that I'm not special. I'm no one, like everyone. And his face crumpled, and he was like, I don't know who's told you that somewhere in the past, but like that, I'm sorry, but that's not the answer. And I felt like really embarrassed because I don't think anyone actually had told me that, but it was something that had definitely developed over time when I was utterly believed that like if you weren't special, like you wouldn't be, like you just wouldn't succeed, as in like more than you wouldn't succeed, like everything would go wrong and people would take advantage of you, so you needed to be like unique, beyond like better than everyone else. And anyway, fast forward, and luckily I managed to get the answer. And it's not I think everyone's answer is different, so me telling you the answer isn't going to give you enlightenment.
We're all suddenly going to... We might be able to finish a bit early tonight, folks.
But it was like, for me, my answer, and I've made it all different, but it was I am this. And that understanding that I am only the person in the present moment, I'm not my past, I'm not my future. And that is the only thing that's there. Anyway, it was the most blissful experience I've ever experienced, that realisation. But it's interesting about what you're talking about, seeing things as they really are. Because sorry, I feel like I've gone on.
That's all right,
But like, yes, I did see that things as they really were, but it's happened to me 2 years ago. And it's like, you have to keep revisiting it goes away, and you can go off the path. That's right.
That's really lovely. Thank you. A beautiful example. Thank you for sharing that. There's so much in there. I mean, I was going to talk about koan practice in a minute, but just to say, I mean, that thing, it sounds like there's something, something's opened up there. And the thing you were saying about, you can say to all of us what the answer was, but I imagine for you at the time, it was like, I am this. But we just hear that and we're like, all right, I'm this. Okay, it doesn't. But that's the thing though, isn't it? It's all to do, that's an experience. It's not and it can't necessarily be communicated in the words that you're saying. It may have been between you and the teacher, but it sounds like the key thing there is that something opened up. And it's really important, the thing you were saying as well about that's not a once and for all experience. It's something that it's something opens, but then in that opening you have a sense that there is a different, it's hard to talk about this, but there's a different level to consciousness, there's a different reality. Maybe with the experiences that you all shared, there's something of the quality of that. That actually there is something else other than our ordinary day-to-day mind. Certainly for me, in the experience that I was talking about, it was a radical shift. I mean, it was temporary, but for me, after that experience, it's like I don't need to be there in order. It completely changed my life, because it was a bringing to life of something which I'd read about, but it was suddenly like, this is true. This is absolutely true. And then on the basis of that, it's like I know then what I need to do, which is following, the teachings that have given rise to this, or following in the direction of that glimpse of reality. So our teacher Bhante Sangharakshita talks about the path as a path of vision and transformation. And I really, really like that. That's it. I think it's unique to him that he talks about the Buddhist path as the path of vision and transformation. And the vision is that thing that I've talked about, basically, which is that opening where you see something that is not of the ordinary nature of consciousness. It's like something opens up. And it can be on the basis of a difficulty or a painful experience, or it can happen on retreat, or it can happen in all sorts of ways. But that's what Buddhist practice is concerned with, is that opening which then points you in the direction of the Buddha. So the Buddha abides permanently in it's like he's fully in that state all the time, with the complete absence of what we talked about with the kleshas, craving, grasping. There's none of that in his experience at all. So he's just abiding in this incredibly, blissful, meaningful state. And he's basically saying to Ananda, look, there is more. Come towards this. Come towards me. There is more here. And these insights that we've talked about, that's what that is a glimpse of that. And then on the basis of that glimpse, hopefully that gives us motivation and reason to continue. If you don't have that, you won't keep practicing Buddhism, basically. You can't practice because you think it's a good idea. Or if you come along to the Buddhist center, you might even meet people that you think, oh yeah, they sound like they know what they're talking about, or everyone's really friendly, or whatever it is. That's not going to be enough to keep you on the path. There has to be some experience of vision. But the good news is that, vision can arise on the basis of something like a breakup or as I said before, some difficulty. But it doesn't have to. Having had that experience, you can then just start to cultivate it deliberately, basically. It's a little bit like, I'm thinking on my feet here, so this might be a rubbish analogy, but, like there are beautiful plants and trees that just occur in nature, but you can actually plant a garden. Does that work as a metaphor? Great, well done. Okay. You can plant a garden, and what you have to do is, obviously it needs light and it needs water and all of that sort of thing, but you also need to attend to it. You need to pay attention to it. You need to do the right things at the right time, and all of that is a path that is laid out for you. You just need to follow it, basically. So in Zen, there is koan practice. That's what that's designed to do. It's a little bit like what the Buddha was doing with Ananda, is forcing your ordinary day-to-day mind kind of into a corner to a point where there is nowhere else to go. So when you have a koan, it's something like, we don't practice koans in our tradition, but there are koans like, what was your original face before you were born? What's the sound of one hand clapping? All of that sort of thing. It's a question that you can't answer with your rational mind. It's like you need to get beyond the rational. Something else needs to open up. And when you say what it is, it might not sound like the wisest thing, but it comes from that place of knowledge, or it comes from that place of wisdom that your teacher is able to recognize, because he inhabits that place, basically. So it's like the Buddha with Ananda, isn't it? He wasn't satisfied with his answers. He's saying, look, Ananda, I need you to get beyond these kind of spiritual cliches, and I need you to answer from a place of spontaneity and authenticity. And that's a little bit like that with koan practice. And then in our tradition, we have all of these different methods, So there's, meditation. What are we doing in meditation? We're looking at our mind, basically. We're observing our mind deeply, so that on the basis of that observation, something else can open up. We see the tendencies of our mind, and seeing deeply, this is what I was saying the verses are at the start, isn't it? When we see deeply into the nature of our own mind, then something else starts to open up. The meditation, and particularly in the context of retreat. So Rowan, you were talking about your first retreat. This is not likely to happen in our day-to-day life unless you're participating in a significant, systematic, rigorous training, not in your day-to-day life. So that means like a daily meditation practice. It means coming to classes, all of that sort of thing. But you'll need some sort of intensity. And that's why we keep telling people every ad break here when we sip your tea, go on retreat, go on retreat, go on retreat. It's not just because we've got a lovely retreat centre that we want you to go to, and it's lovely when we go on retreat, all that sort of thing. It won't really take effect unless you're in optimum conditions at least for periods of time, from time to time. When I first came along to a Buddhist centre, it took me years to go on retreat, and I really regret that. It's partly why my practice didn't really take hold, and why I didn't really, why it wasn't really effective, was because I wasn't going on retreat. And it's like you go on retreat and you get a sort of a blast of intensity, which sounds quite unpleasant. It's actually really lovely most of the time, but you're in quiet, you're in silence, you're away from your phone, you're in beautiful surroundings, there's quiet, there's silence, there's space, so the mind can just naturally start to quieten down and be still. And in that stillness, that's where something else arises, and you start to notice how beautiful everything is. You start to notice how things actually are. A friend of mine I was leading a retreat with many years ago, she used this analogy of in meditation is a bit like going on safari. Like she said, you go there and what you want is to sort of see these exotic animals, but in order to do that you have to be really, really, really quiet, basically. And if you're quiet enough, then maybe like a zebra starts to come out or a giraffe starts to come out. But at that point, you don't just go, oh my God, there's a big giraffe, like that. Because, you have to have periods of sustained sort of stillness and calm, basically. So retreat conditions are ideal for that. And in our tradition, we emphasize friendship a lot as well. And that's not just because it's lovely hanging out with other Buddhists. It is. But when you really get to know each other deeply, in the context of having these deeper aspirations to move towards where the Buddha is, it's really helpful we don't see ourselves the way we are. We really don't. There is not one person in this room that actually sees ourselves the way we are. And partly what I mean by that is we don't see our own potential. And it's really, it's wonderful. And it's extremely helpful having people that know you, that are also on the Buddhist path, that see you more clearly than you see yourself. Through communication, you can help them to do that, and they see you in terms of your potential, and not just in terms of your own limited view of yourself. So these are all sorts of ways that we can start to do that, and we can start to give rise to this kind of other sense of vision or openness. And what the Buddha represents is that in its fullness, basically. It's that in its fullness and completeness. And as you traverse the path, that experience starts to open more and more until it becomes your experience more and more and more of the time. And you dwell in that, and you dwell less in the ordinary mind more and more of the time. Okay. Okay, I'm not going to say any of that. Haha, now you all want to know what it is. I just wanted to just go back to this point actually about that experience and what Ananda was saying to the Buddha was, he's saying, look, you need to speak from the spontaneous mind. You need to speak from a place of depth, not with your ordinary mind, basically. That's what the Buddha was trying to draw Ananda towards. And you were talking about this, I think, a bit. This is what happens in koan practice. And even on retreat, it's not that the world becomes different. It's that you see the world differently and you experience the world differently. I often notice this when I go on retreat. It's like, I remember having an experience I was leading an intensive meditation retreat over Christmas and New Year. And I was very, very moved one day I came out into the courtyard and there's a Buddha statue there, and he had a cobweb that was just coming down from his ear, and it had dewdrops on it. And I was like, God, that's so beautiful. It was breathtakingly beautiful. And I'd seen it 5 days before, but I just walked past it and I was like, oh, somebody needs to dust that Buddha statue. And actually I saw it 5 days later, and it was like the beauty and the profundity of that. And often when we start to move towards this, it's not that things are radically different. It's that we see things in their fullness, and we experience things. It's like as if for the first time. We see things as if for the first time, with a freshness and a clarity of vision. And this put me in mind of when I was thinking about this, I thought it's like a poem by T.S. Eliot. So one of the 4 quartets, he says these lines, and I'm going to read this to you. We shall not cease from exploration, and at the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Through the unknown remembered gate, when the last of earth left to discover is that which was the beginning, and the source of the longest river, the voice of the hidden waterfall, and the children in the apple tree, not known because not looked for, but heard, half heard, in the stillness between 2 waves of the sea. So I think that's so beautiful, isn't it? It communicates something of this idea of a quiet voice. It's like a quiet voice, but we're just drowning it out all the time. So we need to put ourselves in conditions where that quiet voice can be heard. And when we do that, it's as if we see things for the first time. Okay, so I'm going to start drawing things to a close now. So when I started off this evening by talking about this thing of seeing into our own nature, so seeing into our own nature and realizing Buddhahood. And those 2 things are not separate. So this is what Bhante says in the lecture. These aren't my words. He talks about it as, it's not that you see into the nature of things, you see into your own mind, and then realizing Buddhahood. It's the same thing. To see deeply into our experience is to move towards where the Buddha is. And every step we take in that direction is liberating. Every step that we take towards that is a step towards freedom. Away from our ordinary craving, grasping mind where we're sort of, we're trying to set things up to do exactly what we want, and we're sort of creating these structures basically that are, if we can't actually, if they're not based in reality, then they're going to cause us suffering basically. But every step we take in that direction is freedom, and it's joyous. I didn't know whether to talk about this, but I will. So I went to, I haven't got a printer, this is a bit mundane, I haven't got a printer at home. And so I went to get my notes printed today. I always pop into the Buddhist Centre just to print my notes. And Sanghadharan was there and he was looking at my notes and he said, you mentioned flamenco at the end. Are we going to do a flamenco class? And I said, I'll see how the time goes. But I said, no, the reason why I wanted to mention that was, and I don't know if this will make sense at all, but I just wanted to sort of leave you with this image, which is on Saturday evening, I went to Sadler's Wells to see some flamenco as part of the flamenco festival. Has anyone people seen live flamenco here? Been to the flamenco festival? Yeah. I first saw flamenco about 8-9 years ago, and I went to this place in southern Spain. I was with my partner. And, you know, we were in Seville, so we thought, let's go and see some flamenco. And I thought, it'd probably be all right, but it will be like a sort of touristy version, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I was absolutely blown away, like completely blown away by the majesty and the beauty of this performance. And every single time, apart from once, which I won't go into, I've been completely blown away by this art form. And I think what I find there's lots of things that I find really moving about it. I mean, it's partly to do with seeing people that have dedicated their life to something and just sit, like flamenco is one of those art forms, you don't just dip your toe in. It's like you do it, and if you do it, you're really like, you're all in, you know? And this performance on Saturday night, it's this woman it was the 25th anniversary of her dance company. So she's a woman called Sara Barras, and she's in her early 50s and just so incredibly graceful. And what I loved about it was the form of flamenco is that people do they do single performances, then they do duets, then they come on, then the musicians do a little solo thing, and then they all interact with each other and this sort of thing. And there's so much love between the performers. Like there was no competitiveness. It was like the guitarist would sort of do his thing, and everyone would be looking at him, going, "Yeah, like come on," and just so beautiful. And just the energy and the grace of it. And the reason why I thought of that is this thing that I was talking about the ordinary grasping mind. When you look at the Buddha, so one of the qualities of the Buddha, other than his compassion, his incredible wisdom, is this quality of unbounded energy, basically. He had infinite energy available to him. And that's because there's so much energy that we waste that is tied up on our kind of petty concerns and all of the stuff that I don't need to go into again that I've been talking about this evening. And when we start to move away from that and we see things more as they are, it liberates this energy. And you know, in Buddhism, like the image of, like, if you think of the Zen tradition, the image is of someone kind of sat there like this, and, you know, it looks, you know, might look very lovely and looks beautiful, and there's these Zen gardens and all this sort of thing. But on Saturday evening, I was thinking, like, I'd really like flamenco to be like a Buddha's sort of national sport or something. Like, that's what it actually feels like. That's the thing. It's like, it might look like this, but what it feels like is flamenco. Like completely open, like what happens when the heart opens, that compassion and that energy and that joy that is just free flowing. That's what this actually looks like. Yeah, maybe that's enough said. So I'm just going to do one more thing now, which is, I was going to say it's not easy doing all of this because everything in our culture is pointing us towards craving, and it's like the pinnacle of our craving is supposed to be falling in love, isn't it? And every pop song is about falling in love, isn't it? It's like, you're so wonderful, you're the answer to my dreams, you're everything, you know, you to me are everything, you're great, la 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 la. And so I thought, as an experiment, I thought I'm going to put a thing into ChatGPT and see if it can write me a love song from a Buddhist perspective. And what it came back with was rubbish. So I thought I'd just have a go at my own. So do you want to hear it? Yeah. Okay, so this is my Buddhist love song. Okay. Ooh, baby, 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 I loved you so, but when the chips were down, you decided to go. I'll miss your smile and cute vocal inflections, even if it was all just my projections. Your love was nice, but at times rapacious, but now I see clearly through the lens of the glaciers. The workings of my grasping mind, as clear as crystal, delivered and signed. So maybe, yeah, baby, you did me a service, although at the time it made me quite nervous. You left me shattered and you broke my heart. It was the greatest koan when my world fell apart. Thanks. So you can tell I'm not really a poet or a songwriter. I'm a bit embarrassed because I live with Oscar, who actually is a wonderful songwriter. But anyway, there we are. Okay, so let's go from the ridiculous to the sublime. And I thought it'd be nice if we finish by chanting a mantra this evening. So if we go all the way back to the story, it's Manjushri's sword, isn't it, that cuts through delusion, basically. And we're going to chant Manjushri's mantra. In the story, it's only him that can save Ananda from his deluded mind. So if any of you are in love at the moment, and you want to leave before we start chanting the Manjushri mantra, that's fine. But yeah, let's finish with the Manjushri mantra, and when that slowly dies away, that will be the end of this evening. Okay.